Welcome to Saving Our Native Bees, and is there another way to deal with the Varroa Mite? Great that you could all be here today, and to give you a little bit of background on our first speaker, for those of you that may not know Kate Mason. Kate Mason is our community advocate who is concerned about the lack of government transparency regarding the influence of corporations on government decision making. Kate has an extensive work history in welfare and community development. She is committed to people having all the information available to make informed and considered decisions on anything which impacts on their lives and the environment. So just before we welcome Kate, can I ask everyone to make sure that their mobile phones are on silent or turned off? And once we've done that, could we put our hands together and welcome Kate to the stand?
Hi everybody, my name's Kate Mason. I'm a member of Community Voice Central Coast. We're a very newly formed group. Our motivation for forming is to ask for government transparency around any plans that are unrolled on the Central Coast and that the community has an actual seat at the table with decision making. So I'm just going to give a little brief overview of what's happened with Varroa Mite, and then we'll hand over to Simon and Dolfi, who are much more experienced around bees. But on the 24th of June 2022, the New South Wales Government notified beekeepers across the state to safeguard their industry after biosecurity surveillance detected Varroa Mite in hives at the Port of Newcastle. And since then, the New South Wales Dept of Primary Industries have killed millions of bees across the state. The next big thing that's happened is on the 27th of September 2022, New South Wales Dept of Primary Industries, known as DPI, has been authorised by the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority to use Fipronil to remove wild European honeybees. Of concern is that honey in the feral nests may attract native bees and continue to be toxic to native stingless bees for up to 3 years. Research has shown that the Varroa Mite cannot attack Australian native bees directly, as they have a different biology from European honeybees. The Australian Native Bee Association states the pesticide Fipronil is being used in a baiting program in the red zones. This pesticide is highly toxic to stingless bees and may remain active within these areas for up to 3 years. I'll just refer to the Australian Native Bee Association as the ANBA. They also stated feral European honeybees will collect toxic sugar syrup and take it back to their nests inside hollow trees. In due course, the feral nests will die, leaving the stores of honey within the trees, and then this remains toxic for up to 3 years. Unfortunately, this is them talking still, native stingless bees and other nectar-feeding insects, reptiles, birds and mammals may visit these dead feral European honeybee nests and collect contaminated honey. And some of these native insects and animals may die from Fipronil poisoning. So I was aware of that. I saw that in the Central Coast News, and then after quite a few months of just going, what's going on here, I put it on the Save the Bees Australia Facebook post and just said, is anyone aware? I don't know bees, I'm concerned about this. And then Simon, who is the founder of Save the Bees Australia, got in touch with me around, doing something about this. And we started up the change.org petition, which has over 15,000 signatures on it, which I'll put back up at the end. So in case anyone wants to sign that and share that around, because it's the more numbers we get with that, the more we can take this to the press and get some attention on it. But you'll hear more from Simon and Dolfi regarding more specific information. So thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I tell you what, we are so blessed to have Kate as a part of the team here with Community Voice Central Coast. The information that she finds out and the research that she does, I know I couldn't do it, so incredibly grateful for her. Thanks, Kate. I'd like to introduce to you now Simon Mulvany. Simon is the founder of Save the Bees Australia, an organisation dedicated to protecting and preserving bee populations. One of the major issues he campaigns against is the use of Fipronil, a toxic chemical used in insecticides that has already killed billions of bees in Australia. Simon Mulvany is a strong advocate for sustainable and bee-friendly practices and works tirelessly to raise awareness about the dangers of agriculture, chemicals like Fipronil, neonicotinoids and glyphosates, and the importance of protecting our Indigenous bee population. Simon is speaking on the use of Fipronil and will discuss sustainable and bee-friendly practices which protect our bee populations. Give a warm welcome to Simon Mulvany.
Thanks very much for that introduction, and a special thanks to Kate. I've been looking for someone on the ground in the area to run our campaign against this rolling out of the Fipronil. And when we think of the negatives that you've read out about this poison, it's not only, it is really effective in killing bees. The way it's so effective in killing bees is because it goes back to the hive, and the bees are well enough to fly back with the poison, but then the poison kills the queen. And that's why it's so prevalent in stopping termites and other things. But it's been so effective in killing that in Europe and other places have banned it. And through my history of running Save the Bees, there's been, you're right, billions of bees killed, but many apiaries lost because of Fipronil. And even last year, there was an article in the ABC where beekeepers were calling for a ban of Fipronil. So the fact that we are using it on purpose is sort of mind-boggling to me. And a lot of people, so I appreciate Kate reaching out, because a lot of people just think about the honeybee and not about the Indigenous bees. And the Indigenous bees are basically doing a free pollination job. So if we did have small-scale localized farming and you had a healthy environment, you'd get plenty of pollination. But what has happened in Australia through the lobbying of, I guess, big pharmaceutical and the lobbying of big industry is now you've got these huge monoculture farms, and that's why this poisoning is going on, is to protect those big monoculture farms like the almond industry that, you know, if you follow the money, is maybe worth a bit more money than, you know, these, than the native bees. And so the fact that they put a price on these things doesn't really work when it comes to the environment. What I took on a campaign, you know, 6 years ago in Victoria in regards to the pine trees being treated with neonicotinoids. And the outcome of that was, when I was dealing with the peak body for the honeybee industry, it was, I quickly realised that they had strategic partners. One of their strategic partners is Crop Life. And well, you might go to the ARBIC website here, and it looks like a beekeeping website, and it's all about protecting the honeybee. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll quickly see that they've got strategic partners, and one of those strategic partners is Crop Life. And you'll click on that, and if you read the things that come up, it's basically saying that glyphosate is good, it's not harmful to consume, and every beekeeper knows, or every beekeeping, you know, the beekeeping industry should realise any glyphosate in honey is a terrible thing, but it not only hurts, you know, the human immune system, but it actually kills the bees. So I'm just being aware that who's running the show here seems to, for me, to be the pharmaceutical industry, and they've had a big voice, and I don't think communities have been able to have a voice on this. And I think by, you know, locals speaking up and saying, you know, that they don't consent to these poisons being used around local areas. And what the aim is to kill every single wild bee.
The problem with this is I think that the big pharma industry have got their hands on it and looking after their own interests rather than all our interests. But if the local community say they don't consent to this poison being used around the area, I think we've got a shot of getting it stopped. A lot of people say, well, what other choice do we have? And our next speaker today is Dolfi, a beekeeper from the area who's actually very sadly lost everything, a very profitable business, all these bees, and he didn't even have the mite. But he has experienced the mite in other places. So there are ways of treating the mite. Another thing that I found just shocking and irrational was they've actually allowed migratory beekeeping. So they've allowed beehives to go interstate while they're doing the poisoning. If they really wanted to stop the mite, they would have stopped migratory beekeeping completely in the area. So the fact that they're doing poisoning and migratory beekeeping, shows the sort of desperate nature of what's going on. But one suggestion as a solution would be to have a research zone that might be, at this stage, it's probably more than 10,000 kilometres, and just don't let any bees out of those areas. You can probably bring bees back in, but that seems to be you save yourself from using all this poison. And sadly, I just got news before that they've found a lot more Varroa in the Taree region with a lot of commercial beekeepers around. So unfortunately, at this stage, the way the indigenous bees might be saved is if this Varroa outbreak, they realise that it can't be contained. And Dolfi will speak more on this, but initially they said if there was more than 5 cases of Varroa, it wouldn't work. And now there's over, 125 or 126 zones. So over such a massive area, it's hard to believe they're going to continue to do this poisoning. And if they do continue to do the poisoning, they don't plan on finishing quickly. It's going to go on for about 3 years. None of these beekeepers can use their sites for that long. And the other thing is that the whole thing is going to be contaminated as well. So all these areas that you might reuse in the future are going to be contaminated for a long time. And as Kate mentioned in that original introduction, this Fipronil will just keep on killing and killing and killing because it stays active in the honey itself. So thanks for organising this, Kate, and thanks to the people who have turned up. And I have had some experience in the past in my own town here where they tried to bring in mosquito spraying, and we campaigned, and from a local council level, we were able to stop that spraying program. So hopefully you can achieve the same things here. And I'll introduce you to Dolfi and look forward to what he has to say, because he's an expert and he's done a lot of work in this area, because he actually started a petition to stop bees getting killed, and I think it's had 28,000 signatures for himself. But he explains clearly there how there was a better way to go about it. And from what I understand, this method isn't even scientific. It is it's mind-boggling that they're doing it this way. Thank you.
Thanks heaps for that, Simon. Awesome information. And as Simon was saying, as far as petitions and things are concerned, Kate touched on that a little earlier and may have something more to say a little bit later. But Community Voice Central Coast, it's about getting the numbers. We need the numbers to present to council and present to government to come together as one voice and stand up for things or against things like this. I'd like to introduce to you Dolfi Benesh. Dolfi is a beekeeper whose hives at Jillaby were recently destroyed by the Department of Primary Industries Varroa Mite measures. Dolfi will speak in the process which the Department of Primary Industries, the DPI, has followed to eradicate Varroa Mite, which contradicts scientific understanding and leads to mass killing of native and European honeybees. Thanks, Dolfi. Let's welcome him.
Good afternoon. Basically, I'd like to concentrate on the scientific points of the Varroa first, just to explain what is Varroa. Varroa is a flea, basically, from the family of the fleas. It's the smallest flea that we know. But as a flea, we know how to control it. We know how to eradicate it. We cannot eradicate it to 100%. We can kill 99%. And that's pretty good in a hive. If we can clean it for 99%, that means that we'll have 1 or 2 fleas left in the hive. And this is the exactly problem that the DPI have. Every hive can have 1 or 2 fleas, but to find them in 28 to 35,000 bees, that's the trick. You can't find it. And this is like having head lice for 4,000 years. We couldn't eradicate them because there's always one left somewhere. And this is the biggest problem that we have. Basically, now the DPI is saying we can find all the Varroa fleas in the gray dividing range on the back of the bee. And this sounds pretty good when we couldn't eradicate camels, horses, goats, which are a bit bigger than a flea. So looking at all that, they've done an experiment, a biological experiment. And if you go back to year 9 or 10 in high school, you'll find that you always have a control unit. You do the experiment, you check what's happening in the experiment, but you need to have parallel to it a control unit that you don't touch. And this gives you a contradiction to see whether your experience has gone wrong or right. Here, in this instance, we have killed all the bees. We don't have a control unit. Do we know if we succeeded or not? This is failing year 9 in high school. If we talk about science, this is not happening. And the more we look into it, it's just mind-boggling because they made an act. The act is in place. It's take place instead of the science. And this is the science, the act. We don't have acts instead of science because science is really a bit more accurate than acts. Acts can be very wrong, and sometimes they take us to the wrong position altogether. The Fipronil is a poison that can kill not just bees or feral bees or native bees. It can kill any insect, butterflies, beetles, anything that can give us some sort of pollination. Flies. We use a lot of flies here without knowing for pollination. Flies will do pollination by mistake. They'll fly into flowers that stinks. So when we look at what's happening exactly, we don't know what is controlling this system. The Biosecurity Act is overruling the police, is overruling the federal police, and it comes from the government. So if we have an act that sits high above somewhere, and we don't know where is it going, we need to start to ask questions. And this is very deep questions, because this is not just bees. This can be cows, sheep, trees. And this takes us back to Victoria, monoculture. Monoculture of agriculture of having only one, say, plantation, trees. It's a mistake by definition. You can't have 4,000 acres of almonds without any other single tree in the area. This is a mistake number one in agriculture. We would like to have a few type of agricultures on the same farm, and we would like to have the bees as well. Once the bees start to be relocated from Queensland to Victoria to create pollination, that's another question mark, because bees are not supposed to do these trips to do the pollination. Maybe in the US, yes, because this is how they used to. But this is a mistake, because this is take all the disease that we know and we don't know from one place to another. One of the big things that we see, again, if we go back to scientific questions, there's two species of bees, the European bee and the Asian bee. We have them mixed here in Australia. They're already here for a long time, and we have about 50 to 60% of the bees, Asian bee, mixed into the European bee. The Asian bee is better in pollination. The European bee is better in honey making. If people want to have pollination, they need to have a farm of bees that's making mainly pollination, less honey. And the European bee need to be more for making honey and less pollination. And that's a big separation within the industry. And that can create also a big misunderstanding, because all the people with cherries, almonds, apples, they need bees all the time because they are not beekeepers themselves. And this is again a mistake. They should have the bees in-house as part of the farm to get the service of pollination that comes from hundreds of k's away. It's not only a mistake, it can bring again all the problems that we see now. And that creates within the industry, misunderstandings can go very far. The honey producers and the pollinators are not the same people. They cannot be the same people. If the honey producers and the pollinators are the same people, that creates all the problems. And from this point on, it just goes odd and odd, because we know how to take care about the Varroa, we know how to clean the bees. It's a simple process, simple chemicals, simple organic chemicals. This process gets done now for more than 30 years all over around the world. We know the process. It's a few processes. It goes as simple as using Timol oil or even eucalyptus oil in high concentration, 5 to 7% in water. It kills the Varroa. You can spray the bees. It doesn't do anything to the honey. And after a few days, the bees goes back to work. Or using oxalic acid in 3 to 5% concentration in water, you can spray the bees once in 24 months and they get clean. These are simple processes. It's not like as if beekeepers doing something special or extra. They'll do the disease control and disease check every year or each time they open the hive. So if we open the hive and we see a problem, we quickly treat it. And that's what beekeepers does. Then there's no need to have an extra cost of taking care of the Varroa. It's part of the system. If we have 3 diseases, we'll check for the 4th one as well. Very quick, we see there's a whole system running out of excuses. Why are we doing what we're doing? If we look into Fipronil poison, they took it out. They make it illegal and banned it back a few years ago. Then we see it appearing again, gets used by the government, and then we don't understand how poisons gets out and in the system. Who's making the decisions? Is there a control unit for this to check every poison when it's going in and out into the system? I believe that I'm covering pretty much most of the question, but if there's any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Well, let's put our hands together and thank Dolfi. The information's been awesome. We are definitely going to have a question and answer time both for Dolfi and Simon. Again, this isn't a microphone, but I would like to come to you and have you ask your question in the mic. That way we've got a recording of it. Does anybody have a question they would like to ask?
Yeah, Dolfi, I'd just like to ask you, with all these hives on your property, are they, or do they have any, or I should say, does your property it has restrictions for people who come onto it?
My property has gone under restriction for 3 years. I can't have bees there, and then within 3 years there'll be another call to check, and they might change their mind. They say that it might have to go for another 2 to 3 years, so it'll be 6 years altogether. The restriction is basically within the 10 kilometers area where I had my bees. So the property is out of question for bees now.
I may be playing devil's advocate a little bit here. So I've worked in biosecurity. I was looking after a project that looked at tomato potato psyllid that came into Australia, and the immediate response was similar to what's happening here with bees. There's two phases. One is try and eradicate it, and every effort is made to eradicate. And so from my understanding, and I'm not saying I'm pro-Fipronil because I absolutely am not. However, the intent, as my understanding with tomato potato psyllid, with the Varroa Mite, I think it's a mite, not a flea. I'm not sure about that, but I thought it was a mite.
Yeah, it's a flea.
They're very different, mites and fleas. Very, very different. So anyway, the initial intention is to aim to eradicate. I know with the tomato potato psyllid, efforts were made. Tomato plants were not and potato plants were not able to be transported out of WA where the incursion happened, and seedling plants couldn't move between states, etc., etc. It took a little while before they realised that they could not eradicate, and then they moved to a management plan, and then everything changes. I would be very surprised if we don't quite quickly to move to a management plan, and that would not involve Fipronil. That's my guess anyway, that would involve all of the sorts of treatments that you're talking about with oxalic acid and so on. I personally think that it's unlikely that they're going to do widespread Fipronil. I could be wrong, but I just wanted to point out that there are two phases in the approach that's taken with biosecurity, and it's always try to eradicate in the first instance, and that's very severe, obviously. It hasn't worked, and that often doesn't work. Sometimes it does work. And then they go to a management plan, which is really a much softer touch. So I just thought I'd say that.
Is it a flea or a mite?
To the best of my knowledge, it's belonged to the families of the fleas, and it's the smallest flea that we know. I think that by mistake we call it a mite.
The oxalic acid that they say they use overseas, does that stay within the hive? Does that actually get absorbed by the honey or by any of the wax in the honeybees' hive?
Oxalic acid evaporates. It usually evaporates within 3 to 4 hours. There's no residue. You don't leave the honey boxes, supers on top of the hive when you do the treatment. Basically, you take all the bees down to the brood box, you spread them inside the brood box, and that's it pretty much. You leave them for 3-4 hours. When you finish the extraction the next day or the same day, you can return the super after about 6 to 8 hours.
Dolfi, you mentioned that we had banned Fipronil and then it came back. Can you tell us more about that? Was it actually banned in Australia, and when was that? What's the process?
I don't know why it was banned. I think it was banned around about 10 years ago, around 2012-15. And then it came back. Now you can find it even in, I think, Bunnings. But to the best of my knowledge, it's illegal. And then somehow it turns into legal again. I don't know how it came back to usage. I know that at some stage it'd be banned completely. But it's still here and everybody can find it and use it.
Just to follow on to that, when was it banned in Europe, do you know?
I think it was in the last decade, but I can check that up easily to see when it was. But yeah, it's been quite a while, and I think it had a lot to do with contamination in the chicken industry because they were using it on birds.
Second question was just with regards to how the banning process came about. Was it driven through the bee association, or was it outside of the bee association? And what is the membership of the association? Is it made up purely of commercial beekeepers, or is it a much broader membership?
It got banned because it was so highly effective in killing bees. So when you research it, that the bees are the main reason why Fipronil is banned. I think it was bee lovers, and I say that meaning it sounds a bit peculiar, but here in America, it seems that a lot of the big commercial beekeepers are actually pro-pesticides. I know it seems strange, but it's because they benefit from doing the pollination, and they can make a lot of money because there's no native pollinators out there. They get to bring their bees out there and charge quite a bit of money. So in America, and people in America have been warning me that they're going to do the same thing here. And they're going to say it's not the chemicals killing the bees, it's Varroa that's killing the bees. But as Dolfi explained, there's ways of dealing with Varroa, and it's not necessarily that big a problem. And people from Russia and other countries that have contacted me, and they're saying, well, our bees are fine with Varroa now. We're not even using treatments because genetically they've adapted to deal with the mite. And I think we're talking about ARBIC, the Australian Honey Board Industry Council. I think there's beekeepers, but there's also the pollination industry, and there's also the strategic partners, which we spoke about, crop life, plant health, and the DPI. So yeah, it's a collaborative thing, and there's a lot more money made in Australia now through pollination than honey, unfortunately. So that lobbying power of the people like Dolfi seems to be dwindling a little bit.
You can say about the Beekeepers Association, it's mainly run by large commercial beekeepers who operate both as pollinators and honey producers, and they try actually to bite on all directions to control the whole thing. My point of opinion here is that the area between Sydney and Bulahdelah, and now it's going to Taree area, is an area that is quite rich in manuka production. It's rich in honey in quantity. Even small beekeepers can make large quantities of honey. And at some stage, probably beekeepers looking at this area also as a safe haven for drought safe for bees, because this area always stays safe for bees. We would like to see, probably better investigation into this area, because a lot of manuka production has gone through the window. A lot of honey production, I assume, probably around 8,000 to 10,000 tons of honey that gets produced by small beekeepers has gone through the window just like that. And this is a big question mark. Who is really behind all this scene?
In your interactions with the DPI, have you had any specific justification for this strategy without good scientific evidence, and as you've said, without good scientific method?
I've been refused in writing and verbally any information, and we've asked to release information, specifically the scientific one, specifically the genetic test of the Varroa. I've got professors working for me that can do the genetic test of the Varroa. I can tell you as soon as I have the test results where are they coming from and how long have they been here in Australia. This completely declined by the DPI. They said to us verbally that they have some sort of risk assessment, and the risk assessment suggested the best way is probably to eradicate the bees, let alone we need to check the words here. This is not eradication or euthanasia. This is just simply control demolition of the bee industry in some areas. We are not talking here about eradication, because it doesn't do the eradication. The Varroa is still here, or will stay probably. We've lost control about it completely. So all the information that we have in terms of science is not existing. There's no explanation except protection of the pollination industry.
Simon, you mentioned that there was, and just correct me if I'm wrong in understanding what you said, but did you say if the Varroa mite is found in 5 different areas, is it Fipronil poisoning wouldn't be effective anymore, or was it what was not going to be effective if it was found in 5 different areas?
I think I got that. Initially, there was a plan in place, and it said if Varroa infested more than 5 areas, then it was going to be pointless to try to eradicate it through poisoning. And Dolfi will know more about this. He's researched it as well. But for some reason in the last decade, that was changed, that act, or even shorter than that. And now we're proceeding over 10,000, square kilometres to try to find the fleas. And I hate to think of how much Fipronil they'll have to use over that time. Obviously livelihoods are being lost nearly every day as well. So, when it got more than 5 cases, it should have shown that it was pointless.
What is their proposed solution for pollination if we've had a complete destruction, meltdown of the bee pollinators? What are they saying is going to be used for agriculture?
Well, if they'll go into complete destruction of the bees, obviously they won't have any pollination. We need to remember that almonds, without bees, you get them 75% less crop, which means you'll have 50% less almonds, and the leftover 50% will be half size of the regular almond that we know, which will be really tiny. So the bees is the main basically driver of the almond to the quantity and the quality that we have. But we need to remember that if you have almond in this quantity, as a monoculture, you need to be a beekeeper too. You need to have the hives by yourself. You need to know how to run them and manage them for pollination. If you want to do pollination, you need to have the hives within range from the farm. But these guys overspraying the almonds as well as soon as the bees get out of there. So they're using heavily pesticide for other insects in the almonds, which put the bees in high risk. So all this industry is under a big question mark, because the only way that I can see it, you must have your own bees to be an efficient farmer. And if you want to have these bees, I can teach them how to do this. But the bees will be fixed position in the farm all year round. They won't make honey. They'll survive most of the year out of feeding. And when they need to do the pollination, they'll do the pollination. And I'll give them the full cost of having a bee and how much it contributes to them and what it does. But the way of bringing bees from northern Queensland to southern Victoria to do pollination, that's the cost pretty much.
Simon, I think you mentioned to me before the way the big agriculture works, and correct me again if I'm wrong in my understanding, or Dolfi, that they import, bring in the bees. They're so heavily sprayed with pesticides that it's almost like a suicide mission for the bees. They don't last long, and then I think Dolfi, you said this to me, and then they're transported back, unwell, lower immune systems, more likely to cause diseases, and that's the process Big Ag uses. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And a lot of beekeepers really don't like going to the almonds for that reason, and pretty cautious about bees returning from the almonds with disease. But if you're trying to make a perfect soup of disease, you'd probably set up a system like the almonds where bees come from interstate and they're only on the one sort of bit of nutrition, and then you spread out to the rest of Australia. So if Varroa does hit the almonds, and the almond industry were pushing for New South Wales bees to be allowed to come in this year, even when they hadn't found the outskirts of the mites, the whole of Australia will get mites very rapidly. So another campaign I ran earlier this year was to stop bees from going to New South Wales to Victoria. But I think 2 weeks ago that was lifted. And it's concerning on that level, but it's, concerning how they could be poisoning at the same time as, the Varroa is being spread. And then on the question before, Australia does export bees overseas to do pollination, and I've heard the almond industry say, well, if worse comes to worse, we'll fly bees in as well. At the moment, they can't do that because we don't have the mite, so overseas bees can't come here. And the reason we've got an export industry for bees is because we haven't got the mite. So anyway, we're going to lose a lot of Australia if it does filtrate through the system.
I have an orchard around my house with about 10 different varieties of fruit tree. I have a very productive vegetable garden around my house with tomatoes and pumpkins and zucchinis. They've killed my honeybees, but I still have a native bee colony, but I'm about 30 metres from the forest, which will be full of wild bees, where presumably we're in the red zone. They're going to come and kill the wild bees, and presumably I either move my native bees or they die. What will happen to my fruit production and my vegetable production over the next 3 years?
I guess if they were successful, that would happen. But talking to Dolfi and other beekeepers, the thought that they can even contain every feral bee and wild bee is just mind-boggling. And I've spoken to people in Newcastle where bees have been killed off in the Fipronil program, or areas where the Fipronil program has been for a while, and they're all complaining that they're still seeing bees around. But it would be dramatic for local growers in the area. It will be disastrous if they continue this for 3 years.
Yeah, I think we need to have a look into that into more detail, Simon, the way that I've explained it to you a bit earlier. Every hive is ejecting every year, especially within these areas that are rich in pollen and nectar. It will eject around 2 to 6 swarms per annum, sometimes 10, 12. And they'll be at the fist size up to a watermelon size. And that's a lot of bees. I'm not saying that all of them will survive, but assuming that only half of them will survive, it takes us into a level of probably, if we kill 20,000 domesticated beehives until now, we probably have 50, 60, 80,000 feral swarms in the Great Dividing Range, where we can hardly find a goat. And we're talking about finding a bee with a flea on its back. This has gone beyond science into the area of comedy. And I told that to the guys from the DPI. This cannot be backed with any scientific explanation. I'm not saying the theory or something that's been proven in the past, but going into a tropical area and saying you can kill all the insects there, that's a bit beyond me. Even with the best poison you have, as far as I know, these insects, they will survive. They've survived us. They'll survive us again. We can poison this area for 3 years. The bees can travel back in and out as they wish. When a swarm in the cave or in the tree gets hungry, the swarm can take off. They can move into a new area. They can fly 3 to 10 Ks. They can fly 20 Ks. And they'll have the Varroa on the back. It's enough to shift one flea from one place to another. As simple as that. And we're talking here about actually trying to find fleas. We need to be realistic about that, to say, yes, it's impossible. We can't kill the bees. Let's clean them. Let's get on with life. And because they've gone into this commitment of let's eradicate, they can't get off this high tree now and say, okay, we've gone wrong. And they've done big wrong. By the way, they've done about $250 million damage, which they compensate with about 20 million, completely denying the sheer size of the damage. And now we're looking at a disaster in the make, because they left all the feral bees with the Varroa to keep thriving without a domesticated one. All the feral bees keep swarming, they keep spreading, they keep going, and the season is great for the feral bees and the Varroa.
Last year, when I saw on the news that this took place, my first thought was World Economic Forum, food supply under attack. And there's a lot of food supply chains around the world that is under major strain. My way of thinking is this is one way of to help stop the food supply in Australia, to really, really slow it down and start starving the people of Australia. What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't go so far as to saying that, but I think they're definitely prioritising the big food growers or the corporate food growers at the expense of the local food growers. So, and they're the ones that seem to have the lobbying power. But yeah, so I don't know, I guess maybe they're making the most of a bad situation in a way, but I don't think Varroa's been injected to hit our food supply, but I don't think it came from a ship either. That's another thing that has been discussed. And whether it came through someone smuggling bees into the country or legally got in, I think the beekeepers I talked to, there's a consensus that someone, did bring it in rather from it coming from the port initially.
I think that there is no conspiracy to that level. I think it's just a few mistakes that has gone all together, consecutive one after the other, and then they just fell in place, and one mistake led to the other, and from high ego decisions and we can do it, they've gone into a full swing of doing maximum mistakes possible along the line, the chain of making decisions, rather than take it into a more scientific point of view and make a scientific decisions rather than going into it's a big thing to say we're going to protect the pollination industry in Australia and failing the beekeepers to become honey producers and make all of them pollinators by force, and then that this has led to the rest of the mistakes basically.
I asked the DPI when they came to my place why they were doing it, and they said that years ago, before there was any Varroa in Australia, concerned people were asked what they would do if they didn't have Varroa. They asked overseas organisations and Australians, but they didn't say what they would do, and the decision was that to stop it from coming into Australia. If that happened, then destroy it. Now, what I want to know is who do we ask to find out who these people were that made a decision all these years ago that now brings in this biosecurity order that when we say we don't want them to come and kill our bees, they just turn around and say, well, you'll get a $300,000 fine because we're allowed to do it. So who do we ask? Who do we actually approach and say, who has made this decision? What interested parties have made this decision?
Yeah, of course, it's the DPI. It's they've got basically the act in place as a act of responses since 2015. They had a different plant before that, which they scrapped and we found in the archive. The original plan was if we have 2 to 5 positions, we declare that it's out of control and we go into treatment plan. They changed the plan in 2015. They put a plan in place. They scrapped the old ones. They scrapped also the scientists who put it together. #1 in the world experts in Varroa here in New Zealand. They recruit new people into CSIRO and they put a new plan in place, which means eradication. And they made it the system that from now on will work. And this is what hits us now, 7 years down the track.
So a quick question for me, as a concerned local community person, what can we do with regards to awareness and in our communities, what can we do?
Stop now eradication killing bees. For some reason, what I found is that the media somehow is getting censored, because we've contacted all the newspapers and all the television and radio channels, and we get very little response to nothing. What I found is that if you don't have the rights for them and they can't get a rating for the show, for the item, They simply wouldn't place it and it'll go nowhere. Archive. It's basically, if you want to rattle the cage now and explain people, to me, this is like the sparrow of spring, because they can go on to beekeepers now, but the next thing will be any farm in Australia that will not, come into the wrong position. The government can say, your cows are sick, your sheep are sick, your dairy farm can be destroyed now. And then basically this is evacuation of farmers from their farm. If you can't have your farming for 3-5 years on your property, you can sell your house or return it to the government, get some compensation, and basically find a place to live. And lots of beekeepers, by the way, been forced to do that. If they didn't take the compensation and retired, I know beekeepers that moved from pretty much our area here into Dubbo and north. This is like moving 400-500 k's with an operation of 1,000 beehives. It's not even funny. If you take now in consideration the distances, the driving, teams that need to go back and forward with trucks, there's a lot of things into it.
I think this petition might be the best thing that we've had so far in regards to making headway against the Fipronil. And hopefully, with the numbers, maybe 13,000, the local media might take it up. But I think it's, unfortunately, Dolfi's correct. I don't think the ABC have done anything about the native bees dying. I think it's a big story, and the reason why the mainstream might not have spoke up about it is because of the ramifications for the pollination industry, and because they get paid a lot of money by the agrochemical companies. So yeah, hopefully going person to person and explaining to people what's going on might wake people up. I've been sort of probably a little bit upset the Australian Native Bee organisation haven't done more to take it on, and they have offered to move native bees out of the area into other areas. But obviously, when we're talking 10,000 square kilometres or whatever it is now, it's we really want to stop them immediately. And I think the closest thing, unfortunately, because none of us around Australia really want Varroa to go everywhere, but I think I got a call from a beekeeper earlier today, and he said that Taree is riddled with Varroa, and so if that's the case, maybe they're going to give up, and then if they give up, they'll end the Fipronil program.
One more thing that we might have to look at the Fipronil as a chemical. Some of the chemicals dissolve and evaporate and disappears. Fipronil is not one of those. Fipronil, if by mistake the bait is falling on the ground, it will go into the underground water and you'll poison the drinking water. Fipronil is a poison, and this is one of the things that need to be always in consideration, is when we're using insecticides of any type, eventually it'll go into our drinking water via rain or via floods. And this is where we need to look at in taking that on, all the chemical companies and also the government. This comes back to us one way or the other via our food or our drinking water. And if you look at Fipronil, I think that at its best it can cause cancer, not to mention all the rest good things it can cause. But there's a lot of things that we don't want to get from the Fipronil use.
Everything you've said, and when I was looking at the petition, the whole thing, I totally agree with everything that you said. But I went up to my friend's house in Gloucester, beekeeper, and when I spoke to her, it was much more of a case of, yeah, the DPI is a bit stupid sometimes, but we must do this for the sake of the bees, for the sake of the industry. And I think she felt like her bee community was split down the middle of some people thinking it was exactly what you said, what I agree, and then other people are saying, no, it's very irresponsible to not do this. So I felt like speaking to her, these beekeepers were split over it, and then I wasn't sure how I felt, whether I should be signing, which is the right choice. Being here tonight, I'm like, I think it's crazy. You should stop this, just everything that you said, but I don't know what other beekeeper thinks. I came here to work out what was the right thing to do.
Look, the best to do for the bees as a scientific decision is to isolate areas. Every area needs to have a name and a definition. So if we have the red zone, for example, it needs to be isolated from the areas outside where you can bring bees inside. The right scientific way to treat the bees, basically, when you have Varroa, is to keep them alive and clean them and bring from the outside, basically reinforcement bees into the area all the time to keep them strong. Bees basically take over the Varroa by numbers, sheer numbers. The more the queen can lay eggs in the season, spring and summer, by autumn, the hive will be strong and clean, probably up to 99%. The bees can have the capacity to clean themselves from the Varroa. With a bit of help, they'll be clean to 99%. This is the right thing to do, to keep the bees alive and control them and clean them. And you keep them productive this way. If you keep them strong enough, you need to clean them only every 24 months, which is about every once in 2 years. If you start to move bees around from one area to another, that's when you create a problem. If beekeepers want to be pollinators, they need to leave or have the bees ready for pollination within proximity to the farms where they need to do the pollination. You cannot have bees in northern Queensland and move them all the way to southern Victoria to have pollination in the almonds, and then after 3 weeks take them into central New South Wales into the canola for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then you take them northern Queensland again. This is how you spread disease right, left to front centre, including Varroa.
On that note, guys, let's give Dolfi and Simon and Kate a huge round of applause and say thank you for their time. I'd just like to add that if we, for those of you that don't know much about Community Voice Central Coast, this is a perfect time to encourage you to get on the Facebook page. There's a lot more coming that we'd like you to be involved with. But lately, Kate has actually shared a lot on the Community Voice Facebook page in regards to the smart cities and the rezonings of our areas. And one would have to raise questions in regards to what's happening with the bees and Fipronil in regards to food production when we look at what's also being planned for the Central Coast. Before we close, Kate, was there anything else that you wanted to share?
Maybe if anyone really wants to do something about it. I mean, we've got people's emails. It doesn't mean that everyone here wants to actually engage and try and work out what we can do at the Central Coast. So could we actually just collect your name or connect your names and emails if you actually do want to be involved in a campaign on the Central Coast to get something moving around this Fipronil policy? Because we won't send it out to necessarily everyone that's here, because some people may not agree. So if you do want to do something, you can see Amanda.
On that note, guys, Community Voice is definitely an apolitical platform. What we are about is about bringing information to the public and getting the public involved to stand together, because obviously numbers do make a difference. They make a very big difference. So we've got an awesome team of people collating information and providing a platform where we can come and stand together, because one of the things, as Kate is a huge advocate for, that you will see very much so on the Community Voice Facebook page, is for transparency and for our involvement in the decision making. It's the consultation, community consultation, that we don't believe we're having at this particular point in time to a range of different subjects, especially this one. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for being a part of it. Could we once again put our hands together for the people that have made this event possible? And of course, we are planning on, fingers crossed, putting this up on the Facebook page. And if any questions pop up on your car drive home or thereafter, please feel free to join our Facebook conversation in regards to the Varroa Mite. Once again, thank you for your time.